And it might lengthen my lifespan to see so many brothers and sisters gathered to listen to culture other than Prince or Michael. I want to begin by praising you for being here and saying that this is a historical occasion. This is a panel on education. This is paramount. And the one thing that I think we forget in relationship to education, and I'll have more about this to say about it later, is that we make certain educational assumptions that has no basis in fact. Now, certain educational realities we do not look at. Powerful people never educate you in how to take their power away from them. So to be educated in this society, to be truly educated, is a contradiction in terms. Education has but one honorable purpose, and one alone. Everything else is a waste of time. And that is to prepare you to be a proper handler of power. If nothing else, power over yourself. When you teach a child the meaning of a stoplight, and when the child can go without your assistance across streets and get back home safely, you have given the child power, the power of knowing when to stop and when to start. So all information is a form of education. If you're wise enough, it becomes a form of knowledge. And if you're wiser still, it becomes a form of wisdom. Now, I'm not going to get into long introductions because I want the speakers to have a maximum of time. Only two speakers are here right now. The first speaker is Professor Donna Richards. She's from my department at Hunter College. The gentleman sitting next to her is Professor Amos Wilson from DeHostis College. Now, originally, she was supposed to go to DeHostis, but we grabbed her for Hunter because we assumed, and rightly so, that was where she would have the greatest amount of development and the greatest amount of support. And she got it. Now, Dr. Richards and I met at the crossroads of both of our lives. I hadn't been married long the second time, and she was active in the civil rights movement. And she came because she was younger and bolder and badder then. She and a group came into my office and how you act, and literally told me what they needed from me and what they needed from other activists, scholar activists. So Tina Harris developed a paper called Black Consciousness. And that was the basis of some conferences we had in New Orleans. We continued that with Roots Day outside of Selma. That Black Conscious paper and the information that came out of these two conferences was observed by a young activist named Stokely Carmichael. And the ideas became the basis for the Black Power concept. We who were in on the embryo, the child of Black Power, have not talked about it, and the real story of the origin and development of Black Power hasn't been known, is not known anyway. But my greatest interest in Professor Richards is her writing and her ability to explore neglected aspects of racism and racial thought. I think once her PhD thesis on the subject is ever published, and it may never be published because of, it surely won't be published in its present form because I don't think the white press can take it. I don't think the black press is able to, ready to deal with it. First, because it's too big and it is financially more than they can handle right now. It will be one of the best books dealing with new insight into racism if it ever saw the light. And part of it has seen the light in a number of articles. But Professor Richards' time is limited this evening, and she might have to leave for the question and answer period. But we're going to bring her on right now. She is a friend and kind of a protege, but she's one of those young scholars that I look to pave the way and be here, opening up new ideas when sleep comes down to soothe my weary eyes.
Hotep. Thank you, Professor Clark. I want to talk very, very briefly about theories of learning and education in African civilization in terms of the African worldview, African culture, and African philosophy, and perhaps touch on some practical implications of those theories. Education, it has been said, and certainly this comes from the African worldview, is a process of personal transformation. And this process of personal transformation, I believe, is a very important concept that we get in Dr. Molefi Asante's Afrocentricity, where he talks about the transcendental process. In terms of Africa, education was continual, and it was integrated into other aspects of life. That is, it is a holistic process. And as one went through this process, as one goes through this process, one is further integrated into the various parts of the culture. In terms of the African worldview, the theory of knowledge, or we could say the epistemology, which underlies the system, is one in which ultimate truth is seen to be intuitive, where it is dependent on your total development as a person, on your spiritual development as well as your physical development, which involves your intellectual development. And I'd like to make a distinction here, which I think would be helpful, and that is between esoteric knowledge and exoteric knowledge or learning. The esoteric would be the hidden, the sacred, where the exoteric is the public. In terms of the African worldview, the esoteric is definitely the base for everything that we do, the sacred and the spiritual. The Dogon people in Mali talk about actually 5 levels of learning. Jerry So, which is the word at face value. Beni So, the word from the side. Bolo So, the word from behind. And So Dei, the clear word these would be part of a process preparing the person to then receive sacred knowledge. And sacred knowledge for them involved the purpose of human existence and the nature of creation. And I think that if we think about this, we can use this as a model for formulating a philosophy of education in which we see stages of gaining sight, which would be the first level, Jeriso, then perspective, Beniso, penetration, Boloso, and vision, Sodei, so that we could then gain understanding and wisdom. And this would be a process of intellectual and spiritual development. Learning in Africa always takes place in stages. And one learns something when one is ready to learn that. And I think that what we can learn from this is that immediately we can begin to put in place initiation procedures which would involve very serious learning for our young people, which would involve their intellectual growth, but at the same time, their cultural and importantly, their political growth, and be based on spiritual development. We can put these initiation processes immediately into working. That's something that we can do. We don't need a lot of money to do that. We certainly do not need European institutions to do that. And it can be a way in which we can gain control of what our children learn. And all we have to do is to look at African civilization in order to get a model for how that can be done. Now, another very important part of this process, which is understood in African civilization, is the development and use of what we would call icons or sacred symbols, which have the ability to touch the consciousness of people at a very, very deep kind of level, so that our children will begin to recognize and identify with those icons or those sacred symbols. That's a part of learning. And part of the problem that we are having now as a people is that we have been conditioned with European icons, so that they are affecting our consciousness without us realizing that. And that's one of the things that happens as we watch videos and partake of the media, is that we see one thing on a conscious level on the screen, but there's a whole nother thing that's going on there that's affecting our consciousness, which affects our learning, which inhibits our personal transformation, or rather enables there to be a development of the kind of person they want us to be, which is what Professor Clark was talking about before. They certainly do not want us to be the people who will be able to take power from them. So what I'm saying is that as we establish these processes of initiation as a process of education, we have got to consciously develop icons that our children can identify with and learn through. Malcolm X is an icon for us. The Ankh is an icon for us. That is, it is an image which embodies concepts and ideas and identity with a particular heritage and history. This involves a system of examination, a system of ordeals. We keep check on spiritual development as one goes through this process. This is what we see in African civilization. Another part of this should be, one of the things that Dr. Alexander talked about was Diop's critique of the monopoly of knowledge by the elders. And what Diop says is that if they just hold on to all of this knowledge, then when they become older, then it can pass with them, and it has not been passed on. But the system of apprenticeship, of tutors, of mentoring, that is, having a close relationship with a younger person who seriously is committed